fantastical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL network.
Yes, welcome on in, everybody, to the Saturday Night Network for another week of patron feedback show content here for you to wrap up the week, the Michael B. Jordan episode, and look forward to the Pedro Pascal episode of Saturday Night Live. My name is Jon Schneider from the SNN. Very excited to be with you on this Thursday afternoon. We're doing the show a little bit earlier. You may have heard on Monday nights. It's been a little bit of a tough week for me this week with some personal news and my family, but everything's okay. Our family is doing great, and just happy to be with everybody all week. But I was very appreciative that our lovely patron that joined us today was able to accommodate. So to do the show a little bit earlier at 5 o'clock. And if you're watching us live, happy to be with you on this afternoon. If you're watching after the fact, hope you enjoyed the show. But without further ado, let me introduce this patron. And I'll just say, this guy has been one of our biggest supporters since we started all the way back in the SNL Stats days. He was one of the original listeners of our show and would always send me messages after our roundtables or whatever we did, messages of support, letting me know like his thoughts on everything. And he is one of the biggest reasons that I kept going, because, and I mean that, because I just appreciated so much all of his feedback. So let me introduce to you for the first time on a podcast, Connor King. Connor, how are you?
John, I'm doing so well. Thank you for having me. That was very kind of you to say as well. I really appreciate that. But all I've said in the past is definitely true, and I mean it. And I'm just so excited to be here. This is so fun. I'm so glad we finally get to do this. We've tried to do this a few times. Was supposed to be here for another episode, couldn't make it. I'm glad we could make this one work. So, I just couldn't be happier.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, really appreciate you and your thoughts. And I know you have a lot of thoughts. I get to hear them all the time about SNL,
Yeah.
but this is the first time that you get to talk publicly
I actually get to
about
talk
them.
to you.
I know, it's cool. So why don't you just tell the listeners a little bit about your background and how you got into the show, because they're meeting you for the first time.
Yeah, so I honestly I don't know exactly how I got into the show other than like SNL is a big thing and it's on and I'm now like a teenager. It should be time to watch that sort of thing. But it's kind of like a really interesting time for me to be an SNL fan because everybody, and I agree with this statement, everybody's always like, your middle school, high school cast is your cast. Like that is who you will always sort of keep with the show. They will always remind you of the show more than other people maybe. But the thing is my cast didn't leave until my mid 20s as well. I'm only 25. Everybody started when I was like a freshman or end of middle school, beginning of high school, and they all just left, especially Cecily, who's like my favorite. So this is really the first like true transition, especially watching as like a super fan. And it's just kind of interesting. Like I don't really, I wouldn't call myself a historian. I've seen an episode from every season, including the not lore ones, but like I don't know if I've seen every episode. So I
That's pretty
wouldn't call
good.
yeah, I've done pretty well. Or at least whatever's like available and on demand because they cut so many things over the years. So like whatever's there, I've mostly seen. But yeah, it's just like it is a very interesting time for me. As I told John before, I didn't even find out until after the episode aired that Cecily left, and that was sort of like the last piece to my SNL core. I mean, Keaton I have watched since I could watch TV, so he's sort of an enigma. But like just true SNL people who I met from SNL, it's wild to see them all gone, but it's lovely seeing all these new people. I mean, I've been so impressed the last few weeks just with how I want to say like confident the show feels in everybody, which we've been in this weird like people aren't here, people are coming back for a few episodes, people were missing a few episodes, yet Heidi's still been here for 5 years and is killing it, but she's not the star. It's like it's been this weird last few years, and COVID's a big reason because of that. So that's like no one's fault, but it's nice to kind of be here. As much as I miss my old friends, I feel the show's in great hands. So I don't know. That's basically whatever my history up to this point is.
For sure. And I get what you're saying completely, because I did go through the same thing. I mean, every SNL fan sort of goes through this similar path that you're talking about, which is like you have your cast that you really, really like, and then they go and you're like, can I still do this? And then you sort of end up bonding with these new people. I mean, I do remember like Taron Killam, Jay Farrow, Vanessa Bayer all join the show, and I'm like, okay, but like these are not like my people. And then they
Yeah.
became my people, and it starts to just like keep rolling over. And I think that's a sign of like the difference between perhaps like a more casual Saturday Night Live fan is like you stick with it, when your friends are watching it, and then you probably go, or you just check out highlights every now and then. But if if you really like get the show and you love the show, you'll stick through the good times, the bad times to get to, whatever comes next. And I at least believe whatever comes next, or what's coming now, is 2 episodes into 2023, is like, damn, like this is good Saturday Night Live. Like we had spurts in season 47 that were like really high highs, and I was like, okay, I could see the future, but like it was just a glimpse. Let's be real, just a glimpse. Season 48 though, like now over the last 5 or 6 episodes, is some of the best SNL I think we've had in years, and I'm so optimistic about our future, and I'm just excited and grateful I get to talk about it. But how are you feeling about season 48?
Yeah, well, it's been a weird season because we had the first 3 without Cecily. Cecily's not even in the intro. Like it's feeling like a new era. Cecily comes back. Episode is cameo heavy. Great, fun episode. Way better than I thought it was going to be for Jack Harlow. Then we have Amy Schumer come in, who was good, and we've seen her before, and I thought she was good, but she didn't bring anything super new that we haven't seen from her. So that was sort of felt like a typical SNL episode. Then we have a very controversial Dave Chappelle episode, which however you feel about it is how you feel. And then comes December. And December is when it felt like the season sort of began for me. It's like I enjoyed those first 6 episodes, some more than others. But like you said, the last 5 have all been hits for me. This week was maybe the worst, but worse is really saying
Oh,
like,
really?
well, I have the last 5, like not of the season. So let me
Okay.
clarify that. It's definitely not the worst of the season. That would be Miles Teller. But like we've been on a hot, like for me to say that this is the worst of the last 5 episodes is a good feeling, because like this was a really fun episode. I feel like this episode really laid good groundwork for what else is to come. It may not be an iconic episode, but we are in such a hot streak. Everybody's been talking about it on the podcast this week, how we are really starting to get back to like pre-COVID hosts, like people who
Yeah.
really like, you should be hosting the show right now, like especially this upcoming week with Pedro Pascal. Like it's like this makes so much sense, and it's like
Let's put a pin in that, because
Yeah, we will.
we're gonna have a question about that later for Pedro Pascal,
we
and
will.
I think like that you hit the nail on the head. Like that's the big thing that like comes out of this booking, which is like everyone's excited about it, but like we'll talk about that for sure.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying, Connor, completely, which is like something changed between like
Yeah.
Chappelle's episode and Kiki's episode, and for what it's worth, I'll maintain, I think Chappelle's episode was a really good episode of SNL, but in its own way. And I feel like the same way that I sort of felt like there was like a dark cloud over that week of covering it. And the same way that like I felt like lifted and like relieved to like move on to that next run of episodes. I sort of feel like the cast and the crew and like everyone at SNL almost feels that way too, because I think everything's just been like light and fun over the last 5 episodes in a way that like I haven't seen it since pre-COVID.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree. Like it's feeling a little bit more goofy, which I like. Like I feel like the
Yeah.
past few years have been so serious in the world, and SNL has tried to have takes on that when they don't need to. Like for some things, obviously SNL is going to cover it. That's going to happen whether it's good or bad. But it's like, for me, I always feel like season 41 and season 42, their news, pop culture, political coverage really worked. And for
Mhm.
like 4 seasons after that, they were trying to do the same thing. And it's like it worked then. I think his name is it Casey Kelly, Chris Kelly? It might
Chris Kelly, yeah, and
Chris
Sarah
Kelly,
Schneider.
Chris Kelly, yeah. And Sarah Schneider, they left after 42, if I recall. And I think
Yeah,
that kind of is the reason why it got a little worse. So it's
yeah,
just
I
nice.
would say like
It's
that,
better.
and then maybe like the producers deciding to like beat some things into the ground, like
Oh yeah, I have Robert De
the
Niro.
celebrity impressions, yeah, that type of thing.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
it took a while for them to like COVID, in a way, like COVID almost forced them to like potentially adapt, and then also kept things around. Like there was good and bad. Like it was just, this is gonna be like in 10 or 15 years, there's gonna be like some really fun like essays and like analysis of like this era of SNL that we're all just like so happy to be out of right now.
yeah. And like also then leading up to the 50th, like we don't need to talk about that in grid today, but like that's
Yeah.
also just another part of the current narrative. Is like this is the core group heading into the show's biggest season arguably ever. And like that's also just very interesting to see them kind of move on from the, because it's been like, it's so weird. Heidi is so good, and it's like she's finally, I feel like, getting the recognition she deserves, like outside of like our podcast world. Like I think somebody, a like family friend of ours, like mentioned Heidi Gardner like at something recently. And I was just like, whoa! I was like, that's awesome. I was like,
Yeah, totally.
I've not heard people like talk about her like who like casually watch SNL, who like definitely watch but don't see every episode. Like they're always just talking about Kate, Cecily, and 80. And it's just, I don't know, it's very nice to see like everybody's starting to fit their own gel. I feel like this cast is really coming together, and that's very like and it's like I don't feel like people weren't getting along before, or not getting along, but just like the cast couldn't gel the last few years because also they're literally socially separated entire season 46. So like they all weren't working in the same rooms, writing together, doing all these things. I think now that they're able to do that, and they're being allowed to focus on the silly a little bit more, because I think that's what we need, it's turning into a great product. And that's evident by Sarah having the first sketch of the night on Saturday,
Yeah.
which is kind of a ballsy choice.
So let me ask you, because I want to push back on one of the points you made before we get into our questions today, which is, you talked about the cast is gelling. Sarah's first sketch of the night, very good. And, we're continually talking about being on a hot streak right now. But you mentioned that the Michael B. Jordan episode to you was your least favorite of the last five. So why was that?
So I think it's just because, and I don't think Michael was a bad host. So let me just preface that. Every sketch felt like Michael was written into it rather than Michael was written either around it or with it. And it like, I don't think they utilized the host as well this week. And I think he was he said Michael be nervous, and I think he was a little bit. And he's such a serious actor. Like every role I've at least seen him in is very serious. So like I was like, could this be an Adam Driver where it's like he's really just like actually super goofy in game? And like he was game, but I just don't know if live sketch comedy was his thing like it was the last four hosts who all just crushed it, nailed it, grand slam. This to me was like a double, if you know baseball references. So this
Yeah.
it was like very good, very satisfying. I would be happy to see him again. I thought he would have hosted at some point the last like 7 years. So like this felt like it was coming, and I think maybe I sometimes set too high expectations for SNL because like you really just shouldn't set expectations. Who knows what they're writing that week? Who knows who's there? Whatever's going on. And I think I set my expectations just a little too high, and it just didn't quite meet, because I think some of the live sketches were just okay. I think that every sketch had a good joke, had a good premise, but it didn't last the whole time. There was a couple like really good ones. I was like, that worked, that was fun. So like, no complaints, but like it was good. I don't know how else to really describe it.
I see that, because like if somebody said to me like, hey John, like rank the last five episodes just in terms of the hosts, I think Michael B. Jordan's probably at the bottom, but not necessarily like out of his fault. Like he didn't do anything wrong. If anything, like there was some sketches where they let him sort of be more himself. I actually think he was pretty good in. Like I think State Farm is a great example of something where he got to shine in his like natural element.
Yeah.
Probably the men's seminar that he did where he's carrying the water cooler, and like I mean like that's something where like he gets to shine in like a role that's typical of Michael B. Jordan. But I would agree with you, in terms of versatility, the a host potentially elevating a sketch. I think Kiki Palmer did that. Stephen Marty, obviously, at times. Austin Butler certainly did that. And Aubrey Plaza was incredible last week. So I think we're talking about some really, really great hosts in this run. And Michael B. Jordan was probably the least impactful of those five. Now, the reason that I really did like this episode, though, is because it sort of, his subtlety actually elevated performers that we didn't get to see otherwise. So you get, a huge night from Heidi, you get a huge night from Dismukes, you get a sketch from Marcelo that, nobody's talking about, but like, that's a big breakout moment for him potentially. Yeah. So, I see what you're saying. And I think this is probably a great transition point to start to get into the questions about this episode, because we could start to cover some more material. So Connor, do you have the questions in front of you? Would you like to read the first one?
I do have the questions in front of me. I can do the first one from Thomas if you like.
Sure. Thomas, who was on our show last week. So thanks for sending
I was going to say, yeah, I'm following his footsteps. So Thomas wrote, I've noticed that the cold opens this season have been pretty strong. Not mind-blowing or anything, but I think I've liked more than in a normal season. This is surprising to me because cold opens are generally my least favorite part of SNL. Agreed. Is that just me, or have you noticed an uptick in cold open quality as well? I agree with that overall, because the cold opens the last few years have been rough. Like, it was fun at the beginning to be like, who's gonna play who, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's them for the 7th time this season. It's like it wasn't fun. I think that the cold opens aren't even like that great this season, but they're so much shorter. And like the cold opens should have almost no business being over 7 minutes at most to me. Like unless it's like a really big top, like that happens every once in a while, that's fine. Like if it's a debate, if there's a trial with some famous politician. But they've like this week, they could have done, I thought, a lot more with the cold open to be like just to bring it to this week. But they didn't, and I was fine with it. It was kind of a quick in and out. Like, we're gonna cover this topic. We have a couple jokes about it, and we're gonna go. And they had something nice to say at the end too about Memphis, but which I thought was really well put in. But it was only like 5.5 minutes, I think. I don't have the exact runtime in front of me, but it was not long, and it's allowed us to have so many sketches this episode, which I loved. And I'm like, just do that more often, guys. Like, just keep it short, have a couple good jokes. It's the first sketch of the night. You don't want your cold open to be the best sketch necessarily. It's not like you don't want it to be good, but you don't want the cold open to be so good that everything else the rest of the night just is not going to compare. So just do these quick cold opens. They're very nice. They're very short and sweet. And we get a couple laughs, then we get into the monologue. And most monologues lately, not to divert from the question, most monologues lately have been killer the last 2 seasons.
Oh yeah.
So just get out of the cold open, get to the monologue. Is what I would say.
For sure. So the timing of this one was 5 minutes and 40 seconds. Thanks to Mike for that. So basically, I think this is a really interesting question from Thomas, which is like, is it like completely underrated that the cold opens have been better? Like, probably. I think there was an extremely low bar to clear all through season 47. We kept being like, well, if you're able to revamp the monologues to make them better, why can't you revamp the cold opens? Like, I remember we said that so many times. And I think that there have been better cold opens. I'll still say the Miles Teller cold open at the start of the premiere of the season was fantastic, and it was different. And like, I think that's, as super fans, I think that's what we're looking for, is just to give us something different, because we've seen the same things so many times. But like, I'm curious from you, Connor, because you listen to the majority of our podcast. Do you find like, I sometimes question, are we looking for things to complain about in the cold opens? Like, have you ever felt like you were listening to the podcast and you're like, we're just sort of like nitpicking at something that's not really there?
I mean, like, naturally, because we're doing 4 shows about a sketch comedy show every week, which I love. But I don't think so, because I don't think the cold opens are that good. Like, I think they could do better. I know it's like the last thing they write every week, so I get that they're on a time crunch. They have whatever set and makeup they have. They're a little bit more constrained with the cold opens than they are other sketches, unless it is something they purposely planned the whole week, which is super rare, or at least not common. So I don't think so. Like, I really just think they could be better. I mean, you look at so many other late night commentary. I know they're often the last ones to comment, but you would think they have at least they can escalate a take from something else. Not that I want them to take a take from another show, but it's like I feel like they could sometimes take things a step further, and sometimes they're just like, this week felt like that to me. It's like, I enjoyed it. It was fine, quick in and out, but part of me was like, and again, this would probably have been an over 7-minute cold open, so maybe I didn't want this, but I was like, what if they actually did, like, they went to Biden's house, they went to Kamala Harris's house, they went to Obama's house, so we see and maybe that would lead to some fun cameos from former cast members playing people that we know or not. But it would, like, imagine like Bowen walking into Obama's house and being like, oh my god, like, instead of his like press conference reaction to it. Like, that could have been fun.
Yeah.
But they probably didn't have time to do that. So part of me is like, you should play your cold opens more. Like, you don't have to do whatever's big on Thursday or Friday. Like, people are going to remember stuff from Monday, Tuesday. I know, like, the last few years have been crazy, but like, people are going to remember stuff from Monday or Tuesday if it is good enough to write about, which often there is.
Yeah, I'll give you like a little bit of inside baseball in terms of like my production planning for like our roundtables every week, which is like every single week, the first thing we do after we get into like our generic topic of like, why did they book this host, is let's talk about the cold open. And the original conception of including that there was that the roundtable is a show that's meant to be the show that people can go back and watch at any time, 10, 15 years down the road, and then learn what that episode represented at the time. and we were predicting what in the long run what people would say about it. So I always felt like the cold open was important to include because it's usually extremely topical to something that like everyone in the universe is like talking about at this particular moment. And that's the way I always felt when I was watching SNL and going back and watching old seasons, is like if I watch the cold open, I'll understand like what was happening in 1987, for example. So I always wanted to cover it. But then when we're actually going through the week to week process, I oftentimes we sit around and we start to like really nitpick them to death. And I don't know that we need to do that all the time. So I do definitely debate, in my head about like what the right thing to do with that is, because I don't think they're that bad. I just want them to get more creative. Like, is that too much to ask?
No, can I be honest? Cold opens age beautifully because you're not in the week. It's usually, again, unless you're watching season 44 all the time, like it's usually a quick little sketch. You'll remember what was happening. You'll be like, oh, that's a funny joke about that thing that happened. But you don't need much more else because you're just watching an old episode of Saturday Night Live. Like, you're not waiting to see what they're covering this week. Like, it's already happened. It's been done. So I think they age well because I do like go back and watch older episodes, and I feel like most cold opens are solid. And like I guess maybe I'm changing my opinion. Maybe we are being nitpicky, but I also don't. I just think they could do a little better. So yeah, I don't know. It's a very interesting question. The cold open has been such a fun discussion, like on this, like since you started this podcast, because it's such like an enigma to the rest of the show, where it's like it's either by far the worst sketch of the night, it's maybe average, or like the Miles Teller one, sometimes it's the best sketch of the entire evening. It's like they've so vary, unlike anything else in the show. Like updates consistent, the show is the show, but like cold opens for some reason they just can't seem to make it consistent in some way.
For sure.
Interesting.
All right, let's take this next question from Hugo Gallegos. That's who sent in this question this week. Here, I'll play the line from Andrew.
I now speak directly to the coward Hugo Gallegos.
All right, thanks Hugo for sending that in. Do the constant brand-related sketches seem to hurt the show? People seem to automatically think that because they mention a brand that it's a sponsor, even though it's not, and they assume that it's funny. Or that it's not funny, excuse me. Does the focus on this type of comedy hurt them in the long run? So this is an interesting discussion because I actually did discuss this with some members of Andrew Dick's That Week in SNL Discord server this week, because there was a big discussion in there about sponsored sketches, because I think it was like all the way back in 2016, SNL announced, hey, we're going to start to do sponsored sketches. We're going to have less commercials because we're going to include sketches that are brought to you in part by State Farm, for example. And this was publicized everywhere. SNL fans have been holding on to this for years, but this never happened. It never materialized. So yeah, isn't that interesting? So like I
thought the Bruno's Mar Burger King one with Emily Blunt was the first one. That's hilarious.
So many people think that, but I've been told, and like I could be wrong, but I just want to like say that because I'm not perfect, but I did ask people who work there, and they said this never came to fruition. It was an idea that they had, and then I believe like one of the execs at the time, like from NBC, spoke to one of the producers at SNL. They ultimately negotiated that it made more sense to have like a little bit of a longer runtime in the episode. But there's like this week when they produced that brilliant State Farm pre-tape, no one is taking money from State Farm to produce this. So it's funny to me, going back to Hugo's question, do the constant brand related sketches seem to hurt the show? I don't even think about it because I'm like in my head, I'm like, this is not sponsored by them, but maybe because SNL never clarified it's affecting people's views of these sketches. Like, what do you think?
Well, it's definitely changed my mind because I was literally about to mention like, oh, does anybody remember the Emily Blunt Burger King like bus sketch that Bruno Mars showed up in? Like, I thought that was the first one, and I do think about this a lot. I was like, was that sponsored or not? It doesn't affect my viewing of the sketch because if it's a good premise and a good sketch, I'll laugh. It'll be good. But that's very interesting now, knowing that actually never happened. Like that, that's a little mind blowing because that was such a big deal, and the runtime has increased since that happened. Like whenever it used to be on Hulu, so you could like see the runtimes clearly. Now you can see it on Peacock too. But like, you can see like season 40 is like an hour, and season 42 episodes are like an hour and 7 minutes. So like they give you like a little extra time. Like they basically put in the music guest time and then put in sketch and basically in front of that. So that's very interesting. I wonder if that's I don't know if I have a take on it yet, because I wonder if that's going to change how I feel now. But I don't know. That's it. I mean, it's also not like anybody from State Farm is going to be like, hey, we don't want our people to think everybody's like stealing each other's spouses. Like, I don't think people think about it that deeply for the most part. So I don't know.
Can you also imagine how crazy this would work? Like, I'm not saying that this wasn't considered and discussed and perhaps even implemented maybe once or twice, but I don't think it was. And I also could only imagine like the crazy nature of this actually occurring and the stories that would come out about it, by writers who are no longer at the show. Like, hey, like I really wanted to write this great sketch, but then SNL forced me to include a Starbucks cup or make it a Starbucks restaurant instead of this restaurant. Like, these stories would start to come out like the same way, like I know you and I are like our Survivor fans. Like we'd start to like hear things about the production of like how this worked. Like there has been not one story in the last 6 years about this actually coming to fruition. That's why I asked the question when I was in New York last year. I was like, is this a thing? And then I was told no. So for me, like, I hope like, let's sort of like spread the word that it's not really a thing, because you should be able to enjoy the sketch as if it's written by the writers with like, not that it's impure for them to be sponsored, but like it's as pure as it gets. I think they just are trying to like, they see brands out there, brand related content, and they decide they're going to write about it.
Like, I mean, they've done plenty of State Farm stuff, but like Jake from State Farm is one of the most recognizable advertisements in the country. And all the Geico Gecko, Limu, whatever it is, for Liberty. Yeah, and Doug. Like those are all so instantly recognizable. To me, like it just quickly establishes what's going on. And like sometimes I think that's needed. Like not everything needs to be they don't need to create their own complete original thing. And it's like it's okay to take Jake from State Farm and have him ruin Mikey Day's life and get with his wife and family. Like I find that hilarious. Like it's funny to me. Like I think that's a great idea. Like Jake from State Farm ruins lives like because of all these policy things that they keep putting on the screen, which I thought was so funny. So yeah, that's very interesting, because I would think about it like, was that a sponsored sketch or did they just like make fun of this brand? And like also like I can't imagine executives like, do you think Lauren's making calls like, hey, State Farm, Mikey Day and Sreer Seidel wrote a sketch this week about Jake from State Farm, like ruining a family. Is that okay? And the execs are like, yeah, because the execs would say no immediately. So it's like,
well, I don't actually, that I disagree with. They would definitely say yes, because it's free publicity. So like, they would definitely.
That's true.
Be cool with it.
I guess I think of like the worst case scenario one where I think it was like Safe Flight. I don't remember which episode, but it's like Beck Bennett played like a complete pedophile, and they were like, "Can you please like remove that sketch? Like that's terrible." Right. And like that one makes sense, but like stuff like this, it's like I don't know. I feel like corporations are sometimes very what's like soft. So I don't know.
Well, the person I want to ask about this is Kenny Among, who's no longer with the show, but often dealt with. He was a producer on the show for many, many years, and he used to be the one that would like one of the main producers of SNL that would deal directly with NBC on stuff. And if we ever get an opportunity to have him on like SNL Stories or something, he's the one I want to ask specifically about this question, because like there was obviously like meetings about like this going down, and then whatever happened after that, I don't know, but. It's a great question, because I don't think we get to talk about it too much on the podcast, but
I learned something new today.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah. So anyways, all the bloggers, the recappers online, like when you see a sponsored sketch, just enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah. Just enjoy it.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to take this next question from Brad?
Sure. It sounds good. So Brad asks, does SNL need any sort of correspondence / permission from State Farm or others for sketches, which we sort of just covered?
Yeah,
they definitely don't, unless like that company like Safe Flight is just like, what the hell, like what was that, like I don't, and that like never happens, because also like
the thing is it's satire, right? So like if people at SNL were ever concerned about like touching on a topic, for example, like a brand, or let's say a person, like really ripping into a person, which they've done like on all different variations of, like the concern would be defamation, right? Like that defamation of character is that I think the legal term for what it would be if you were like really going after somebody and changing the public perception of how people view that person. But because it's satire, they are not responsible for how the public then begins to view them based on satire. People are allowed to make fun of them, and it's SNL is a sketch comedy show. So as a result of that, I don't think writers at SNL need permission to write anything besides from the bosses at SNL.
I agree. And like, if State Farm goes out of business due to the sketch, they have way bigger issues than a Saturday Night Live sketch for the Michael B. Jordan episode. Like, like it's just that's such a bigger issue for them. So sometimes I just I wonder, because I think corporations can be sort of soft or very wary of how they look in every single manner, that sometimes they get I don't know if scared is the right word, but they're just really. But who cares?
Yeah,
this was the best sketch of the night. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I thought it was, at least personally.
absolutely.
And one of the better pre-tapes of the whole season. So it's I'm not going to complain, but I get why people are it's because you immediately associate something with the brand, whatever you associate that with. So that's going to affect your view of the sketch no matter what.
For sure. Okay, let's take this next question from Eric, who asked, has SNL been missing male camaraderie over the last several seasons? So interesting question. We talked a lot about, this week specifically on the roundtable, we talked about does SNL need an alpha? What does it look like? What's missing from the cast potentially? Is male camaraderie missing from this current cast, Connor? What do you think?
Well, so if we're talking this current cast, I think we just got another great duo this past weekend with Andrew and JAJ. They screamed Forte and Sudeikis to me, it just felt like it so much. I don't know how to describe it, but I was if we don't get another couple sketches with them pretty directly playing off each other this season, that stinks. We need to have this. So right now we kind of do, but I think we're going to get out of that. The thing with this current male cast is you have Keaton, who's been there forever. Mikey, who was a writer for years, then joined in season 42. So he's also deeply ingrained in the show. Then you have Bone Yang, who came in and halfway through his season, they went to go at-home episodes. Then you have Andrew Dismukes from season 46. Then you have JJ, who exploded from 47. And then you have Michael, Devin, and Marcelo this season. And unless I'm forgetting somebody, I don't think I am, other than the update hosts who aren't in sketches. They all haven't really been together. Nobody's really been together for that long. And when other people, before JJ came on, Beck Bennett was there, who did so much. So nobody right now is literally, I think, worked together enough to develop that. But over the last few seasons, I definitely think we've had it. I mean, we had Pete and Chris doing a lot of stuff. We had Alex and Mikey doing a lot of stuff. Keaton and Chris did a lot. Even before that, Taryn and Bobby were doing a lot together. Bill and Fred, obviously. So I don't think it's really an issue. I think we're just right now at a time where the male cast doesn't know each other really. And we get a lot of
true.
And we get a lot of male hosts, and depending on the sketch premise, that may take a role away automatically from a male cast member. And I think that does sometimes affect things more than we think. We need to ask Mike about that. But that, to me, I think is also a factor. They just don't have as much time together.
I love the point, honestly. I think it's great because we don't have enough time of these people together. And I always hear about Heidi and Ego sharing an office together. And that's what really bonded them over the last few years. And obviously, Kate and Adie and Cecily. But we don't know which of the young male cast is bonding together yet, because we haven't seen it. We haven't heard them talk about it. They're just so young. And Mikey is sort of not with his contemporaries anymore. Keenan's not with his contemporaries anymore. So they're still legacy cast members, but it's a little bit different. So I'm very curious to find out, see how this develops. And I do think that we hit on something really extra special today with the duo question, which is, seeing JJ and Andrew together reminded me of how much SNL works in pairs. How great sketches are when you have two cast members together doing something. And it's something that I think SNL hasn't done enough of over the last few years, which is pair up, cast members and then have them produce something. And that's something that I'm really excited about and hoping they will do in the future, because you named all these iconic duos over the last several years, but I want to see more of them. And I actually think, a lot of people outside of the podcast have been asking me what's the deal with Molly? Are they gonna be something on the show? And I never really know what to say about Molly, because I just haven't seen enough from them. But I
Yeah.
always think to myself, if only Molly had a pairing that we could pair them with on the show, then we could see a little bit more. Maybe that's what Molly needs to succeed on the show, similar to a lot of the ways I was going to say, like the season 21 cast when they came on. You had Will Ferrell and Daryl Hammond who were paired together. Will Ferrell with Sherry O'Terry, like that type of stuff. It's like sometimes when new people come on, they just need like a buddy.
Yeah, well, I wonder if Molly, because I think they knew Sarah before they were on the show, and they
Right,
were
right.
both just in the promo for Pedro Pascal. So I'm like, Sarah, like, help them out. Like, you're doing very well. I don't know what that means, but just like help them out. Because I agree. I'm starting to think like, especially since they haven't done an update piece alone yet. Devin has had a couple focus pieces mostly on him, but he's like kind of been with other, like he hasn't been an outright lead per se. Like he's mostly played off other people. Marcelo has proven to sort of me to be able to fit in with anybody in any vibe, but also be alone. And Michael Longfellow also sort of the same. He's done his own thing twice, but he's also been able to work with other cast members in a sketch. And Molly, they've just sort of like been a part of sketches. They've done well. I've enjoyed that. Like I'm one of the few people who like the deer sketch from the Megan Thee Stallion episode, and I thought they were very funny in it.
I think you messaged
But
me about that.
yeah, yeah, because I think nobody liked that, and I was just like, I loved it, but I thought it was so stupid. But I do think they need a duo, and I feel like it's got to be Sarah. Like they both are like chaotic, escalated energy, and then Sarah will also bring in the body horror humor to it. And like I don't know how they fit. I'm not a writer. I'm not them, but like I agree. Molly's gonna need somebody else to, I think, get them going or get an update piece on.
For sure. Okay, well, this is what I want you to do, Connor. Can we go through the exercise of pairing up the male cast together? So let's take Mikey and Keenan out of the equation. Let's take Andrew and JJ out of the equation, who seem to be a good pairing with each other. And let's look at the other male cast. So Bowen, do you have a pairing for him that you like? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a male cast member per se, but if you think there is a good male camaraderie for someone like Bowen, do you have a good example?
I would say Ego for sure, because I know they're
Okay.
very good friends in real life, and they're in the intro together, like sharing a glass of wine. I was like, I'd kill to be in that room. That seems so fun. So I would say, but Bowen's another one who like doesn't need another person. Like Bowen steals the room anytime he's on the show. I think he's maybe the best cast member currently. It's hard to argue against like Keenan, because Keenan's just such an entity. But like I think Bowen's maybe the most talented overall. But I think like Bowen and Ego would be a great pair. Like I would love to see them do more sketches.
That's perfect. So then Bowen has his person there. So let's then look at the rookies. So we have Marcelo, Michael, and Devin. But two of those three, do you see any of them together?
This might just be because of this week. I would say Marcelo and Mikey Longs, because there was a weird moment where like, and maybe it's part of Marcel's character. Like when Michael Longfellow came in, Marcel tapped him on the shoulder like 5 times. It was like a weird amount, and it felt like he just kept doing it naturally because like they're buddies. They both just started SNL together. They both like seem like they're probably the same age, and like I don't know, they just seem to like they both seem to me the superior of the 4 new players, and I think they've all done well, but the 2 of them to me seem to be the most seasoned. So pairing them up this season makes the most sense.
Okay, for sure. And then I know like Dismukes and Longfellow were pretty good friends, I believe, outside of the show. So
okay.
that is an interesting
That's another thing.
aspect of things.
Yeah.
I mean, look, some of the cast of previous generations, they just, like I think of, like Dana Carvey, who worked really well with Mike Myers, but then also works well with Kevin Nealon. Like it doesn't always have to be, separated into specific duos, but I think it would be great to start getting some more pairings. Could be fun.
Yeah,
All right.
I agree.
Connor, do you want to read this next question we have from Natasha? I just have to run outside the room and get a different computer charger. So if you could just read
Go ahead.
answer it, and I'll be back in 30 seconds, okay?
Take your time. Yeah, go for it.
I'm trusting you.
Yes, I can handle it. Thank you. And this is a good one for me, actually. So, Natasha, through 2 episodes of the post-Cecily era, who would you say the current stars are of the show? And so for everybody who doesn't know me, Cecily is probably my favorite cast member of all time. So it's been a weird last 2 episodes without her. But if I was going to say who the stars are, you kind of, Keenan leads the screen time. So Keenan is sort of you can't really debate that Keenan's a star of Saturday Night Live. He's obviously there. I don't really think Mikey Day is a star because I think his writing is much better than his performance. But if I was gonna make like a Mount Rushmore, it's hard not to say Bowen. It's hard not to say Heidi. It's hard not to say Sarah. And it's hard not for me to say JAJ because he's playing, the president. So I'm giving like a Mount Rushmore, John, of who I feel like the people are right now. Kind of excluding Keenan and Mikey because they're, Keenan's a weird debate because he's been there forever, and Mikey I think is a stronger writer. But for my current like Mount Rushmore, I think Bowen, Heidi, Sarah, and JAJ is sort of where I would go. I would have thought before the season I'd put Ego in there, but I haven't seen enough from her to get into that top 4 yet. But there's plenty of time, obviously. But that's what I would say.
I agree. I mean, I think if we're going to talk about like tent poles of the next generation of cast members that are really just going to be like the stars of this, stars on the show, let's say, I think for me, it's going to be Sarah and Chloe. I think you have to put in there.
Yeah.
Those are two like on the show that I think are going to continue to dominate in their own ways. Heidi's a really interesting case that you talked about where I do think she's a star, but the biggest question is it too late for Heidi in her 6th season? That's the big question mark, right? Like, is she planning on staying 4 more years, in which case she's going to dominate the show for the next 4 years? Or are we near the end of Heidi's run? If she sticks around, I think she will be remembered as having a big role over the next generation, but that's a big question mark for me. So I think Chloe and Sarah are probably the bigger names here. Ego, I think there is a question mark there, which we'll continue to, look at over the season, which is she's having a good season, but maybe not a all-star season. And then JJ, you mentioned, I think that totally makes sense in terms of the political impressions, and then also being able to show what he showed off the last 2 weeks.
Oh,
Incredible.
Great. Yeah, I love it. I'm so like, I've always loved JJ, but I'm so encouraged by the last few weeks. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, he's so good. Yeah.
So my Mount Rushmore right now would probably be Sarah, Chloe, JJ, and Bowen. I think are the 4 of like the future stars of this show right now.
I think that's fair. For some reason, I think Chloe, for me, like, it felt like she weirdly for me peaked around the Britney Spears sketches in the COVID season. Like, I don't know why, and I love her Jennifer Coolidge too. But there's something to me like she's very good, but she's not quite the star yet. And I think like they want her to be, and she's getting there. So like I think we're going to see a lot of her this season. So in terms of screen time, I think she's probably definitely towards the top 4. But but the argument with Heidi's good because Heidi could leave before season 50 theoretically. Like if it's
I don't think she will.
I don't think she will either. No, nor should she. Frankly,
that would be a bad decision. Yeah.
She should be a star for the show through the 50th season at the very least because she deserves that and she's capable of that. But it's interesting if that happens, then does that sort of box out Chloe a little bit more? Because I assume we're going to get more Ego soon. We're only going to probably get more Sarah. So where does that leave Chloe? She's in a very interesting spot. Chloe's a fascinating cast member from just like an outside perspective, where it's like they have all the talent, they've done a lot already, but they're also, I don't want to say middling cast member because that sounds offensive because she's so talented, but she's not quite in that upper echelon yet that I think she can be.
For sure. I think,
and I don't know what it takes to get there, but
yeah, she's definitely had the support of the show where she like could dominate a show on a given week, and she has done some really good shows this season. But for whatever reason, you're right. It sort of feels like there's always like somebody in front of her just on the show, like getting the headline. So it'll be interesting. I think that perhaps has to do with like her having, I think what Chloe needs and what Chloe's missing is like a really strong character that's not an impression. So
that's what we were saying about JJ all last year. It's like, where is he outside of the cold opens? He's not doing much.
Yeah.
And
now he's starting it, right? And we're all loving it. Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, so I'm hoping the same thing for Chloe. And Chloe's sort of in what you were just mentioning, she's always sort of getting outshadowed. It's almost the same trajectory that Heidi was on, where it's like Heidi was brilliant right off the bat. Like, when the first, to bring it a little bit back to this episode, when the first Angel was on in the Larry David episode in season 43, I instantly was like, Heidi's a favorite automatically. Like I was so, she's one of the most quickly convinced people other than her and like Bowen. And I would say Ego. I was just immediately like, and JJ, I was just like, they're going to be gold. And she's never slowed down, but she had Kate and 80 and Cecily and Beck and Pete and those people there for so long, like it was so hard for her to, I think, break out. Even Leslie for a while Leslie Jones was, big on the show for her first 2 seasons. So it's, it's like, is Chloe going to be in the same trajectory as Heidi? Is like her 6th season going to be her biggest? It's like, that's kind of wild to say. Like, and that's nothing against them. They're just in a very good cast and have been in large casts.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take this next question from Fred. Fred wants to know, did something happen behind the scenes to reel back Longfellow? Alternatively, do you think it's possible Dismukes maybe complained about the lack of time? So this is interesting, right? Because, I did ask this question to Rich Tackenberg on the roundtable. I was like, how does this happen? Like, how does like Andrew Dismukes just go from like being not on the show at all to having a career night? And he sort of was like, okay, it definitely has to do with like the host being like, I resonate with Andrew Dismukes and picking out his sketches, which is a really dangerous thing, right? Because if SNL is only picking Andrew stuff based on the host liking Andrew, then we're not in for an amazing Andrew Dismukes career.
Yeah.
Alternatively, the Longfellow stuff is interesting because Mikey Longs had a really strong start to the season, but he has definitely taken a little bit of a step back. So as sort of now Cecily leaves, all the performers who are waiting to like eat her have like
yes,
gone to work. They're like ready to go. But like now the rookies are sort of like in this weird spot of like, when do we feature them? When do we not? So, he's another one, right? Like we saw Marcelo this week have a feature piece. Like, are we going to get a feature piece from Longfellow in the next little bit, or maybe another Update performance? I mean, I'd love to see him back on Update doing some stand up. That'd be cool too. All different things to watch. He's probably the one in 2023 we've seen the least of potentially. So Connor, what do you think about Fred's question?
Ultimately, I think Michael Longfellow is just a first-year cast member. So I think we could get a big update piece and a sketch this week, and this question is almost erased. Now, it's a good question, but it's almost like he just hasn't had a big last few weeks. Steve Martin, Martin Short were there. Like, they're going to dominate the whole show. Austin Butler was a phenomenal host, and it was Cecily's last episode. Not really Michael's night to shine. Aubrey Plaza comes in last week. There's a million cameos. There's a lot going on. Aubrey's also like just absolutely rocking it. So like, but he also did well in like little stuff this week. Like when he came on, he spoke a little Spanish. He's like, hey, it's like, I feel like I know like white people like that. It's like, so he does like good little characters, like the Brendan Gleeson one with Andrew, the photo shoot. Like he even was good with his sidelines there. So I'm not worried. I don't think him or Andrew are working. Like, I don't think Andrew's doing well because Michael's not doing anything. And I don't think Michael's not doing well because Andrew did everything. I just think it's what it is. He's new. There's other people to focus on that they haven't been able to focus on in the last few years. I think his time will come. I don't know. We don't want like 5 Michael Longfellow update pieces this season. I think he's very good, but I don't need like a ton. Like, how many? Like, you might not know this off the top of your head. How many would like Leslie Jones do a season repeat? Because I feel like they would do like they did a lot.
I think they did 5 or 6 a season at least.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, I don't know if I like that, even though I'd liked those pieces. It's like, like let's spread it out a little bit.
Yeah, I think, first of all, if I had to like look at the 4 rookies this season, I think Michael Longfellow has the highest ceiling so far that I've seen. And I think that we're going to come a point in a year or two where we're going to be like, did we do a show once in the middle of season 48 where we were questioning if Michael Longfellow was having a good season or not? Like, we were like, we're going to be like, this is bizarre. Because I think like we are going to get to a point in maybe a season where Mikey Longs is going to be having 5 or 6 sketches every episode. Yeah. That's just like, that's what we've seen before in the past. And we're going to see
Andrew this week.
Yeah.
Andrew all of a sudden was in 7 sketches. And it's like, he's barely been a part of season 48.
I'm not worried about him at all.
I'm not either.
But I am worried about Andrew. I have to tell you, like, I still think, even though we had a great night, like we have to just like beat the drum of like, this was good, like keep doing this.
Hey, Lauren, did you hear that?
Yeah, I still genuinely feel like they don't believe in him. Like I don't know why. Like it's like you've been looking to recapture the Forte thing for 13 years, and it's like now you have Forte Light, so just accept it as part of the show. This is what we want.
Yeah, like I think Andrew Smooks is a very good performer, but I think sort of like Mikey Day, he's a excellent writer and a very good performer. So he sometimes needs, like, that sounds wrong though, because he was so good in the Falling Down sketch. Like his, how you doing, bud? Like I love that, but yeah, his stuff is so him. Like I know immediately it's an Andrew piece, even if he's like not the star. I just like I know this is him. And I think sometimes it's either going to vibe with people or it's not. And a lot of Andrew stuff also focuses on Andrew's character, and the host may want to do more. I don't know exactly what goes into choosing sketches like that. Like the in betweens on that is like I don't know, but if they don't mind, like I don't think Michael B. Jordan minded being in the background in live sketches a little bit more. Maybe that was just how the writing worked. I think there's not a coincidence there. Like I think they just he was good, but I don't think he was as good as the last four hosts live, so he had less stuff to do. So maybe that worked well with Andrew because Andrew's like, I'll carry this, and he's like,
well,
that
here's the
sounds
thing
good.
Connor, is like the sketches that Andrew excelled at this week are like him sitting at the table and being like, okay, I have this idea for a sketch where you are constantly falling down because obviously you're this like sexy guy with swagger and like you're never going to fall, but like we see you falling all over the place. And then there's this whole like bromance that develops. And then obviously MBJ was like, yeah, like I'm down. And then he's like, okay, I have this other idea where we get like a bunch of like weak men who don't know how to pick up girls. And then you come in like with your water jug and start telling me about my forehead. And then he must've been like, yeah, like these things like don't get through unless like people are laughing at the table and the host and like Lauren and Higgins are all looking at each other and they're like, that's something, right? Because if MBJ like wasn't down, then it doesn't work. So yeah, so that's the thing. It's like we're not there, so we don't know like exactly what happens. But my worry is that Andrew is becoming a cast member that is too potentially host dependent on his stuff getting on, and I just pray that's not it. Like I want more.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's a really interesting. I didn't really think of it that way before this, but I definitely agree that because like I thought about before this is like I would love to see another Andrew sketch with the host in a pre-tape. I don't know what the situation is, whether they're falling, I don't know what they're doing. But like I love that sort of like Andrew's checking in on the host like they're buddies. Like I think that that's a fun thing. Like I love the backstage stuff like that, like they're playing characters with themselves. And like, but
that's what I want with Punky. That's what I feel like I need from Punky is for her to just
for
do
2
that.
hours about how we need more Punky. But like, like I think Andrew does need to rely on JAJ or try to get into JAJ a little bit to be like, hey, like let's do more stuff. Like I don't know how those conversations work, but like JAJ feels like he's at least he or the show is purposely trying to put JAJ outside just the impression box. Andrew should like jump on that and like try to I don't know, what they would write, but that he just needs to be like, let's do this together. Like this would be great.
For sure.
They scream Forte Sudeikis to me. It really was like cool.
That's awesome. Okay. Yeah. Can you take this next question from Casey?
I can. Casey asked, which of the stars of Netflix's You People would you want to host again this season? And why is it Julia Louis-Dreyfus? And that's funny because Eddie Murphy is in that film.
Yeah. I say Eddie for me.
I would say Eddie too. But that being said, I definitely want Julia Louis-Dreyfus to host like so much more. She's done, I think, 3 times. Like that's absurd. It's absurd. She's not a 5-timer. I remember really liking her season 41 episode. I don't remember her others deeply off the top of my head, but there's no way they weren't at least solid because it's her. So that's a funny question. I didn't even think about that like before I saw it earlier. But Jonah Hill maybe too. But like I think we've seen enough of Jonah Hill on SNL. Maybe that's just his last episode. I was kind of like on, but I would love to see Julia again. That would be really fun. I feel like she's one of those people who I understand most of this is done in hands to promote something else. That's like basically the entire point of, not the entire point, but it's a big point of why everybody's hosting the show. Julia Louis-Dreyfus does not need a reason to come host Saturday Night Live. If they just put her name in that on the cards and post it to Instagram, it makes sense. She's a comedic icon, but that would be a fun show.
100%. Couldn't disagree. Couldn't agree more. Sorry to say.
Couldn't disagree more.
Yeah, mine's all over the place, but yes, couldn't agree more. Though if I had to make a pick, it would be Eddie, just because I always like to see it. So, and I'd like to see Eddie come back and host without the burden of Eddie coming back to host. Like,
I agree. Like now, like I think he's gonna wait till season 50, but like it feels right for like this kind of season for him to come back to host. Because you would think if like somebody like Eddie's gonna come back to host, like they're gonna want to like do SNL. Like they're gonna want to like take over the complete show. And not that this cast can't hang with him, but like he can come over and take over the show with this cast right now. Like they're in a transition. Like now is sort of the time for you to feel like do that. So I hope we get it.
100%. All right, let's take this last question from Jeremy Boulard. Jeremy wants to know, it feels like SNL hit the jackpot with Pedro Pascal hosting the show. He has two of the biggest shows on television right now. How do you think he will do? So we covered this a little bit earlier in the show and we said, let's put a pin in it. But yeah, that was the premise of like this crazy thing that's happening at SNL right now, which used to happen all the time, which is like, let's take one of the biggest stars in the biggest thing that's happening right now and have them host Saturday Night Live. Like, when was the last time something like this happened where, people could not stop talking about The Last of Us everywhere? He is the star of that show. Obviously, Star Wars, Mandalorian, that's hugely popular, but like that would be somewhat out of date if it's like, okay, why now? But like, like The Last of Us is like on episode 3 going into episode 4 this week. It's the biggest show on television at the start of 2023, and you have the main character hosting the show. That's crazy.
It makes so much sense, and it's like I love trying to predict who's hosting SNL. It's a stupid practice. It's like it just happens. Like there's no need for me to like try to think about this. But I thought he was going to host the first episode of the new year, and then he didn't. And I was like, well, maybe he just doesn't want to do it because like there's no way they didn't ask him to do it. And then this happens. I was like, okay, well, thank God. I think he'll be great. It's like, with all due respect, he's a great actor. Congratulations on his Oscar nomination. Brendan Gleeson is not everybody's first choice to probably host a show. And I thought he did well. It just isn't like the moment. Everybody's not like rallying around like, oh, here we go. Like, this is what we were all waiting for. Like, this just makes so much sense. You don't even need to think about it. There's no need to question it. He's probably going to do very well. If I had to guess, he's a very good actor. Like the show's been on such a hot streak. And like I was sort of saying before, it's like we're getting people who should be hosting the show. Like Keke Palmer should have already, but like especially after Nope, should host the show. Austin Butler should host the show. Obviously, Steve Martin Short, welcome anytime. Aubrey Plaza having a big moment right now. Michael B. Jordan, Creed 3 directorial debut makes sense. Like Pedro Pascal, like biggest show on TV, is doing like Game of Thrones numbers, if I recall. Like it's literally exploding. So yeah, it just I hope this continues. Like I don't want to look past Pedro, but I'm like, you're doing really well right now with your bookings. Like,
yeah,
let's continue that.
I do know that the host past Pedro is booked, and
okay,
that will be fun. Yeah, we will find out on Saturday, but it will be very, very fun. It'll be a good one. So that.
Ooh, I have a guess for you. I'm going to share offline of that then, because I have a prediction. I won't share it, but I will talk to you offline.
Yeah, let's just say something that happened last year at the same time, I believe is headed for happening this year at the same time for this episode at the end of February. But I'll leave it at that because we'll wait for NBC to officially announce it as we do. So that is so yeah, Jeremy, I mean, great question. Honestly, super pumped to have him on the show. I think we're back to the point where SNL is going to start looking to book the biggest stars, and they can do the show now. So that's
I think less people. Yeah, I was going to say, I think people are getting caught up on their projects, or they at least have a week to fit in SNL if that's something they've wanted to do in their career. So yeah,
absolutely. All right, Connor, that does it for the questions for this week. You were fantastic. I can't believe it's been this long, like since we've been talking about it, and now we're like finally doing it. And you should have done this a long, long time ago.
I know. That's how I felt like at 30 minutes in. I was like, what took so long? I was like, this is ridiculous. Like we should have definitely done this way before. But hopefully we'll do it again.
We will.
So I'm very thankful that you invited me here. Like you allow the patrons to come on, whether it's me or others. I think it's a really cool opportunity for us. And I think what you're doing here is great. So I'm very happy to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all of your support. Is there anything you want to plug?
I have nothing to plug. I have not been on social media for like 5 years because I'm healthy. So I'm not there. I probably am gonna join the Saturday Night Network Discord at some point, but Discord's very confusing to me, and maybe I'm just haven't invested my time to get used to it. But you might catch me there. If not, see me here next time I do this.
Yeah, absolutely. You should join. And if you are a patron and you're listening and you haven't joined the Discord server, come on, join us. We get to talk and have some fun and talk about SNL. It's a
sign
good
up
time
for these shows too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. If you definitely, the spots are still open throughout the rest of 2023, at least the first half through season 48. If you want to join one of these shows, definitely register because I love getting to talk and meet new people. So Connor, thank you for joining us this week for what is coming up. So we have our hot take show on Saturday night, right after the Pedro Pascal and Coldplay episode of Saturday Night Live. That show will be with Andrew Dick and Amanda Mitchell. So
Oh, that'd be fun.
yeah, brace yourself. It's going to be a good one. So I'm looking forward to that hot take show. Next Monday will be a very fun roundtable as well. We're going to have By the Numbers show next week. I'll be on with Mike for that one. So we'll get to talk through the screen time from that episode and sort of wrap up this first run of 2023. And then I'll be back in 1 week's time with another great patron for the patron feedback show. So really want to thank everybody who joined. I mean, we had such a lively chat for being, around this this early in the day. So I appreciate everybody for hanging out with us. And of course, Connor, for joining us today. My name is Jon Schneider from the Saturday Night Network. We will see you next time. Have a good